Okay, so this gets into everybody's favorite biotechnology topic of cloning. So if you think back, have you guys all heard of Dolly the sheep before, the first cloned organism? Okay, so how did they clone Dolly the sheep? So they had a whole bunch of genes that were the genes from Dolly the sheep, and what they did was they took DNA-coded particles, and they took, this is not a gun like pow-pow gun, this is like a very small insertion needle, essentially. In this case, we're talking about how to insert genes into plants, but it's the same thing if we were going to insert genes into animals. You take the DNA-coded particles, we shoot them through the phospholipid bilayer or the cell membrane, because the cell membrane is fluid and so things can come and go throughout it. So there we've got our plant cell, and it's got its chromosomes there in the nucleus. We shoot the DNA-coded particles of the genes that we want into the plant cell, and there you can see it's got its nucleus, it's got its genes that we put there, and then when the plant goes to multiply its cells, it is going to incorporate that new DNA into its genome, and then we have basically done evil science, and we laugh. So here what we see is a great example of evolution. It's a great example of how we can make food more nutritious. If you think back to the time of the Pilgrims, where the Pilgrims and the Indians sat together and they had this beautiful feast at Thanksgiving time, and they had turkeys and they had corn. The corn that they would have had back then wouldn't have looked anything like the beautiful, sweet, juicy modern corn that we have now. It would have looked like ancestral corn, which would have just had a few kernels throughout the corn. But as we have been able to work with corn, and we've been able to select through artificial selection and put together the plants with the that are making the most kernels of corn, you breed them together, and then the baby corn plants make more corn. And then you take the babies and you breed them together and you get more corn. And on and on and on and on. 20 years from now, corn is going to look entirely different than it does now. It may taste better. It may be more resistant to insects or to weeds. It may be that the more that we screw with it, that maybe it will go extinct because we'll mess it up so badly that we won't have corn anymore. So if we don't have corn, think about all the stuff that has corn in it that you eat. I bet you everybody, as you eat your breakfasts or your lunches, you almost can't go a whole day without eating some kind of corn product. Not only corn in its own form, like corn kernels, but corn that's ground up and put into meats to make it bigger. So you might have like a little meat patty, and then they take the corn and they make the meat patty bigger. So it can improve food nutrition, make it have more vitamins, make it have more nutrients, make it less fattening. They can also make farming more efficient, so less use of pesticides, easier to grow, easier to maintain. It can make our food better, but some people don't think that this is a good idea. So here in America, we're basically like, yeah, more food, better food, let's eat more food and we'll have more food. In Europe, they have the exact opposite mentality. In Europe, they're like, this is Frankenfood, it's going to kill us. And it's like, you've all read about like Monsanto is going to take over the world, they're going to control the food supply. So it's basically, you know, maybe scientists, just because they can do something, should they do something? It's a really interesting question of bioethics. Here's that golden rice that I was talking about before. White rice is just that natural bleached state of rice. It really doesn't have a whole lot of nutrients. It's really not all that good for you. But if we take the genes from the daffodil that make it yellow, and we take the genes for and introduce it into the golden rice and make the rice produce beta carotene, that can help to keep people from going blind. So it says at the bottom, almost 10% of the world's people suffer from vitamin A deficiencies. So in places where they eat just plain white rice, they are not getting those nutrients from their food. So the addition of beta carotene allows white rice to increase its vitamin A, and then that can help so that people don't go blind. Almost everyone in the United States consumes genetically modified foods regularly without knowing it. So if you had cereal this morning, you probably had genetically modified foods. If you had coffee, coffee's been genetically modified. Some of the most common genetically modified foods are corn. If you look down at the pie chart, you can see that 55% of corn plants are not genetically modified, but 45% are genetically modified. So essentially, you have close to a 50-50 chance anytime you eat a corn product of it being genetically modified. If you wear cotton clothes, the 76% have been genetically modified. So I guess maybe clothing, it's more acceptable to genetically modify since it's not going into our bodies, it's going onto our bodies. Soybeans, 85% of it has been genetically modified. That's like your fillers for your meat. Soybeans are in like your breakfast bars or your cereal bars. Soybeans are a great way to add protein because they have higher amounts of protein than using corn, and so they're more filling also because they have more protein in it. So here in the United States, you can't go a day without eating genetically modified foods. So what's another thing that genetic modification does? If you look here, we have what's called Bt corn. It used to be that corn plants could be easily destroyed by insect pests. So the grasshopper comes along and gnaws away on the plant, and the plant is dead. So scientists took a bacterium, and they took a plant cell, and they created what's called Bt crystals. And Bt crystals are poisonous to insect pests, and they don't think that they're poisonous to humans. But you ever notice that people find out that something's really bad for you way after the fact when they have already done it? So if you're ever up late at night and you hear like those asbestos or melanoma commercials where they're like, were you exposed to asbestos? Well, a lot of us were exposed to asbestos. It was very common to put it in our houses, and then they find out 20 years later that it gives you cancer. So here we've got Bt corn, and it's got these crystals to kill grasshoppers in it, and we don't know what it does to us. So for me, that's kind of scary. That's why a lot of people choose to eat organic, because it wouldn't have things like this in it. So the Bt crystals, toxic to these things that would eat the corn. Now we have nice, lush corn plants that are full of these insect pesticides that we don't know what's going to happen from them. So on one hand, we have more food. On the other hand, it might kill us. So it's interesting to think about. We have into tomato plants this crystal that kills these worms that get in and make the tomato plants all mushy. So we have perfectly round, beautiful, tasty tomatoes that could kill us in 20 years. So here we have herbicide resistance. So if you've ever heard of Roundup, that stuff that you can spray on weeds and then it just kills them. So we have some plants that have herbicide resistance. So you spray the Roundup on the plants and the weeds, and it only kills the weeds and not the plants. So that sounds great, but we're spraying something that kills onto our food. And I think we should think about that a little further. So look at why this is such a positive. If you look at salmon used to be the size of the salmon on the left. Those are the wild-caught salmon. That's what's naturally out there swimming. But if you look at the genetically modified salmon, the ones that are grown in those big pools, they're called farm-raised salmon. You can have them in there. They are extremely large. They produce these huge salmon fillets. So is it better to have the little tiny fish that hasn't had scientists messing with it? Or is it better to have the big, giant, juicy, tasty fish that we don't know what it's going to do to us? Same thing here with the cotton. I think most people are okay with cotton since we're not putting it into our bodies. But the set of crops on the left are just normal cotton plants. The set of crops on the right are the cotton that have weevil resistance. So a weevil is like that picture of what's on the front of your lab manual. They come in and they just eat away at the plants. And so we've scientifically, genetically engineered weevil resistance genes into the cotton on the right. And we get better crops, big, beautiful crops of cotton. And the weevils don't eat it because it kills off the weevils. So, interesting. Let me pause this real fast.